We do have partnerships, and I'm working with a map company in Oregon called Fior Innovations, and they did the first map for us. I've been talking to a company in Poland called Astrography. They are an online print they're an online print company, basically, and they have maps and astrophotography and art, and they're a really cool company. And they recently incorporated in the US, so they may end up being our distribution channel. And then this is kind of what I'm calling the space robotics endgame. So now imagine that we have done this, and we have these consolidated maps on the moon and Mars, and around the world we have agreed that this is going to be our official map. We're all going to work towards the same goals. There really are two approaches that I can see. One would be to pour your money into a fleet of roadbots and then have the space agencies work with you to make these roads up on the moon and Mars. The other is something that I think is even more promising called Uber space. If you think about Uber doesn't actually have a fleet of taxis. They just have a logistics platform, and they coordinate all these taxis and all these drivers. So the same idea here, you could build a space logistics platform and just farm out the robotic side of it to the various space agencies and companies around the world, and then your job is just to coordinate the whole effect. But in any case, either way, I think this is near-term technology. I hope I've shown that. It's something we could do now. Certainly the maps, no problem, and even I think the robotic side of it we could do if we collectively decided this was important. And so why should we do that? Well, I think I've shown you that the astronauts felt more comfortable. So there's this concept of redundant systems. So while it's true they're going to have nav systems and they're going to have other ways of getting around, they really like those rover tracks. So we're going to give them increased safety, better navigation. We're going to be investing in lunar infrastructure. A road is a fairly fundamental concept. Anytime you're going to go up and to somewhere new, you're going to want to build some roads. You've got global cooperation, the democratization of space, the benefits go on and on. So I am on the internet. You can find me at Reliquence.com and on a site called Alignable. That's a B2B social networking site. Reliquence is a scalable idea stage startup company. And the idea behind Reliquence is what's called a two-sided marketplace where we match cartographers with brands. And I am currently looking for a co-founder who has experience building two-sided marketplaces. That's a kind of a known thing in the internet world, and ideally has already sold and done this, because it's not apparently the easiest thing in the world to do. I will also be doing a shorter version of this at the Launchpad session, which is kind of like a TED Talk, 7 minutes fast. And I'll be focused a lot more on the startup company and what the startup company is hoping to do. And then I also have these slides if you want them on SlideShare, but I also want to offer you a map. So I brought some inaugural maps here, and feel free to help yourself and take one home. And if you have any questions, I'm available. Well, so if you have this concept of global nomenclature guidelines, just like the IAU does for landforms, everyone works towards the same high-level guidelines. And so your European clients would have to get together and within the parameters of the nomenclature guidelines come up with their names. They've got their own astronauts, they've got their own subculture, they've got their own things that they want to do. They've got areas they'd like to explore that are different from the United States. So I think this has to kind of be a democratization process where everybody is working towards the same set of rules, and then we all kind of get involved depending on our level of funding and interest, really, is what it would be.
I have a question.
Okay. Go ahead. Yeah.
Go ahead. I'm curious about
directional markers. Within the roads we have.
Oh, right, yeah.
And the JPL Morse code piece is kind of interesting. I was wondering if the Apollo astronauts had a little arrow over there.
Yeah, you know,
Oh, this is the direction we were going.
or this is the direction back to the lunar module, right? You know, that's where they're, you know, if they get confused out there, they're going to try to get back to base. So maybe you always have an arrow pointing back to the base or something like that. Yeah, there's lots of room for creativity around how to mark those roads. That's true. It's a good idea, yeah. It's kind of funny, isn't it? Yeah, I like this.
I'll jump in then. So my question was, I feel that the possibility of having something named after you, if you can Schroeder to Mars or on the moon or whatever, take a big risk, is a very big motivator for a lot of people to do that kind of thing. And so I was wondering if you'd studied at all some sort of set of rules where people would really have some faith that if they took this big risk, they would probably get something named after them in proportion to the amount of risk they took. Have you looked at that?
Well, okay, so I did look at that, and I started this with the idea that if you were going to invest in some kind of, you know, major investment in space, you know, you could get a road named after you. And it started to get really complicated because now you're going to have a have and have-nots kind of thing. So the people with a lot of funding can name the roads and the people who don't have a lot of funding can't. So instead, I do think that the better model is to stick with nomenclature guidelines that kind of limit what you could name a road. And the question is, are people going to be interested enough to have their own map, right? Their own map with the roads that they have charted and named that aren't named for themselves, right? That are named for an astronaut or named for a lunar feature or something like that. And I think probably just in the interest of credibility and making sure that we're sticking with something that looks a lot like what they're already doing up there with the craters and so forth, that we don't want to just have people randomly naming roads for themselves, you know, things like that.
I don't think they would do it for themselves. I think it would be like some central body would name things for people who've accomplished significant things.
Right, and that's what you do in the nomenclature guidelines. Right. You say you can recommend an astronaut, or you can recommend, but somebody's going to have to pay for that. And so there's two different groups. There's the group that comes up with these guidelines, and they're probably some sort of nonprofit, and then